All right, everybody. I am your host, Steve Schmidt, CEO of Magnetic. You are listening to the Magnetic Podcast. Special guest with me today, Chris Walker, somebody who I really have admired in the revenue movement, kind of looked at in sort of like this person who's leading the way and allows me as an entrepreneur to sort of look at what he's done and grab a little bit of the cheat code. So, Chris, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Wish I could be there with you in that new, beautiful studio in Austin. How are you doing?
Yeah, Stephen, great to be here. Yeah, wish you could be in the chair next to me, but we'll make it happen next time. I'm looking forward to doing this virtually and being able to catch up with you at the same time.
Yeah, man. Well, you're looking great. You're looking healthy. The company's doing well. So let's get right into the questions. You are leading the way in the new era of revenue. It's a lot of responsibility because it's a big thing. And I can feel that you feel that. But talk to me about, as an executive, knowing that you built this called $20 million plus company and you've had to weather some things through various stages of the economy. Does that feel like a ton of responsibility, or what does that feel like to you?
I'm not sure I'd look at it as responsibility. I think that when I reflect on it, it's like an opportunity for me to be able to share the things that I have learned in my career and the things that I continue to learn today, whether it's through consulting or leadership or, running a company or thinking about building another startup. And so as I continue to evolve as a professional and as a person, I have the opportunity to share those things that I'm learning and be able to help a lot of people, which I get the confirmation that I'm helping a lot of people on LinkedIn in the comments every day and in the DMs. And so, yeah, I look at it more as an opportunity than a responsibility.
Walk me back to, 4 years ago, you were in your apartment, it looks like in Boston. And my understanding was your video sort of journey, and this started with you choosing to chop up Zoom calls. When you were in that chair, choosing to do that, did you envision this happening? And what did that look like then compared to the reality of it?
No way. When I started my quote unquote company, I was a freelancer consultant trying to figure out how to make 15 grand a month to replace the salary that I got from the company that I just left. A lot of people reflect on this, and when they look back, that generally they just weren't thinking big enough. They weren't able to conceptualize at that stage of their life the opportunity and the things that they are actually capable of. Transparently, that's kind of where I was at. Like, if I was able to build $1 million company, I thought that was like so far away and like would have been so amazing, and it was. I reflect back on those times as some of the best, and when I was building the company, is just figuring out how to get from, zero to get your first $5,000 contract, or to figure out how to, get one more customer and reach 83K MRR, which is $1 million a year. When I started the company, it was really about how, I didn't even recognize how unique my thoughts were at that point. I thought that everybody thought the way that I thought, and everybody knew the things that I knew, and why is my perspective so special? And then I started when, I had a couple of customers. I went to a couple of the local conferences in Boston. I think this is 2019, with total respect to all of the speakers that were there. I don't even remember who was speaking specifically, but I sat through the sessions for a full day, and I was like, the shit that these people are talking about, I learned it didn't work 5 years ago. And it started to give me a little bit more confidence to share my perspective, which then quickly gave me the feedback of wow, I'm actually helping a ton of people. I'm actually producing ideas and insights that other people don't have that help them be more successful, that they felt along their career but haven't been able to put into words the way that I've been able to. And that makes me happy. So
you talk a lot about mindset, and I think that's new to people in B2B to want to hear that in an active conversation. We're used to it talked about differently. We're taught to adaptation, being consistent, but we're not ever really talk to you about conditioning our minds to make sure that that's there. And I'm not, real personally, I shared with you, I've been through the toughest shit of my life the last 7 months, and just being able to hear, it's really interesting to hear a revenue leader being able to talk about that, because I can tell that it bleeds into other areas of your life, whether it's working out or the way that you view relationships or those things. Is it all encompassing to you in that shift of mindset and big thinking, or is that really isolated into revenue?
I think it's everything. At this point, for me, my personal life and my professional life are kind of the same thing, and it's been that way for quite some time. I had a really interesting point, but I lost my train of thought. Can you just run the question real quick back?
Yeah, I was just saying, when I hear you now talk on Revenue Vitals and you talk about mindset, and I don't hear you just talking about it in terms of revenue. It's an overall sort of life thing. And where it helped me was not a distraction from my personal life. It was, hey, my mindset needs to also say If I need to shift my focus from revenue frameworks to getting my shit together in life frameworks, it's still mindset. And so for me, it was very encouraging because I could like get two things done at once. So thank you. You seem to fit in with other people who were very different from you, who were helping me in other ways. So my question for you is that mindset for you and that expansive thinking life, is it kind of has to be, or is it really to revenue and how you talk to people about it?
It's everything. And if you're not like disciplined and have the right mindset in your fitness or in your relationships, then how do you expect that you're going to be able to bring that completely different perspective into business only? I think you need to look at it as entirely as a human and all of the key parts of your life. Having a strong mindset doesn't mean that everything is glamorous and there's like rainbows all the time. Like my life is not glamorous. I fight fires all the time. I have major responsibilities. I have $1 million and more a month in expenses and people's salaries and things that end up being my responsibility for a lot of people's livelihoods. And so it's an opportunity that I'm grateful for, that I think that I'm capable of, that I wake up and love to do. But the mindset that you bring to it can easily, like your perception of reality can easily point you to this is the worst thing ever, or this is the best thing ever, or anywhere in between. And two people, and this happens to me a lot as I've gotten more conscious to it, two people can look at the exact same situation and see it the entire opposite way just based on how their mind is programmed to look at things. From my evolution as a like young professional, 22 to 25, thinking that I just got to show up to my job and eventually I'll get promoted and people will, and then I'll be a VP and like I just deserve all these things and they'll just happen to me. And then you get 3 years into your career and you realize none of this shit's happening for you. No one cares about you. You're not entitled or deserve anything. You got to earn those things. And then went through a 4-year period of my life where I was an employee, but was working on my mindset, my consistency, my discipline, my ability to create strategy, to look at other areas of the business outside of just product or marketing, which then really propelled me and set me up so that when I did have the opportunity to start my company in 2019, I was ready. I was disciplined. I knew the work that needed to be done. I knew when I saw the opportunity on LinkedIn, I totally capitalized on it. I was quick to hire smart people to then help me and propel the growth. And so the mindset for everybody, but especially for entrepreneurs and CEOs and executives, I think has to be the foundation for you.
Yeah, there's a statistic, I believe I shouldn't quote it, but I'm going to. 58%, I believe, or even higher of entrepreneurs end up in divorce or separation. So it's significantly higher, I think, due to that stress barrier. And it's interesting because the preparation, like you said, is you walked into it knowing, hey, I want to be ready for this when this happens. I think a lot of people today, and I did something similar. I really did. I listened to you and Jake Dunlap for probably a year and like just wrote notes and then checked things. But I feel like a lot of people right now maybe stumble into it, and it's a much different way to get into business than being intentional. I want to talk about, I want to get to data bias in a second, but I want 2 more questions that are a little bit, call it people orientated. Right now, I think performance, like you guys are known for performance. Revenue, these big things that are hard to do, right? If everybody could do it, it'd be, you'd charge a lot less money, but you guys get out there, do it, have a great reputation. While you're doing that, the world is fucking chaotic right now. And I feel like everybody's got a reason to be really fucking scared. And that's a choice and that's a mindset, but it's also like the reality of it. I'm like you, where some people don't like it when I tell them I don't watch the news, I don't read articles, and they ask why. And I just say, because I can't change it. And they say, well, don't you want to know about it? And I said, well, if I can't change it, why would I want to know about it? And maybe that sounds callous, but I feel like it would just take me in places I don't want to go. And that sounds selfish, but bringing it back to this is at a performance-based driven company, how do you balance creating, call it a safe place to work for people who want to be in a culture of performance, but yet want to still have that dubbed safe place?
I mean, when it comes to like the news or the overall content that you consume as a person, just be aware that you're consistently being programmed and will over time think in the same way of the content that you consume. So I'm very intentional about the types of content that I consume and the types of content that I don't consume, and curating my feed, whether that be on LinkedIn or other social networks. And so that's just a little bit of a note there. When it comes to the work that we do in terms of driving revenue for companies and increasing performance and ROI of marketing activities, and even looking at the revenue analytics and giving them tips on how to improve their sales and marketing alignment or update their metrics and a lot of other things that we do. When it comes to the culture, I think that there's a couple of key foundational elements that a company requires in order to have a thriving culture. I think at the center of that needs to be positive business performance. It's tough to have great culture when your revenue is declining 10% and you're, burning cash and you can't raise money. It's hard to continue to have a great culture. It's not impossible, but it puts you in a much harder position. I think it's about having clear, compelling vision of where you're going in the future that the people at the company believe in and want to be a part of. And then I think there's a huge element of transparency and communication and things like that, so that if in the absence of information, people are going to make up in their brains what's actually going on, which is typically like negative or not actually what's happening. And so providing the information actually allows people to have the context to understand why decisions are being made or what we're doing. And so I think there's like some foundational elements of culture that end up being sort of required before other things can even start to take effect. We actually just got back from Denver, Colorado. We did an offsite there. We brought our whole team together, which we find to be, I find personally to be the highest ROI expense that I have in my entire P&L every year, even considering doing it up to twice a year moving forward because of the impact that we have. And also we're a remote company, and so bringing people together I think has a huge impact. And so things like that can be hugely impactful. And then I think it's about, like, if you just look at the micro of like, okay, as a leader, if you want your team to post on LinkedIn and start to adopt these new strategies, then looking at how do you as a leader lead with the behaviors and the actions that you want your team to exhibit. I think those all become really important elements to culture.
Last question on culture. It's so fun to listen to you answer to that, because I know you can see it. And people like Megan, I look at Megan as someone who I've looked at as much as you in a different way with Refine Labs. Talk to what she's meant to you in building the company.
Yeah, Megan's the best. If we didn't partner up in 2020, then my company would still be 7 people. And I think that having the self-awareness as an entrepreneur to know your skills and to identify who do you need as the number 2 to grow the company, to fill key gaps, whether that's for some founders, it's the CTO. For other founders, it's the person who knows how to drive revenue. For me, it was all of the operations. I'm product, marketing, sales, strategic finance, vision. All of those things are really complemented by Megan's core skill set. And even her as a professional, she has evolved incredibly from, an executive at startups for a long time, being really successful now as an entrepreneur and my business partner and a leader in the company. And she's at a point now where like she can run the company. She's really talented. I'm grateful for all the work that we did. And we went through a incredible run from when we started working together, and the business was probably doing 1.6 million ARR. And then the year after that, we did 6.8. And then the year after that, we did 19.8, and we had a really strong run, and absolutely instrumental in making that all happen, from hiring the team, fostering and facilitating the culture, and selling deals when we need to sell deals, and retaining customers and expanding customers when we need to do it, and just being an overall really strong business partner and leader. And I'm really grateful for that.
It's great to hear you talk to from that perspective. It's really unique. Now let's shift into a few questions around revenue here. There's some things that people don't consider. When you said mindset, now we were talking about maybe a bigger life thing. Let's double click on that into revenue. There is data bias, right? I know, I've proven it to myself. I feel a certain way about things. I walk in, someone shows me the data and I go, fuck man, I was completely wrong about that. How much data bias is there? How do we get rid of the data bias? And why are we so programmed to walk into this the same way we do with everything, which is with a judgment?
Whether it's subconscious bias around data in your little go-to-market machine, or more broadly that you walk into an interview and because someone looks a certain way or is dressed a certain way or has a tattoo on their neck, that you automatically make a subconscious judgment about whether or not they are fit to do the job without them ever speaking a word and ever you seeing their resume or background or skills. Subconscious bias exists everywhere. And so that's the first thing to recognize. The second thing to recognize is that when it comes to like data and revenue analytics overall, that you can collect and graph and tell whatever story you want with the data that you have. You can collect data and then you can analyze it in a certain way to tell whatever story that you want. I watch it every day with companies that waste millions of dollars on LinkedIn ads or content syndication or their trade show boost they've been doing for the past 12 years, or the SDRs that they carry that might have been like a 24-month CAC payback in 2019, but now are like a 48, 60-month CAC payback right now. And they just have the subconscious bias that, predictable revenue, this is how we are going to grow. And they're able to take those and then justify somehow that the 60-month CAC payback right now is okay enough to keep doing it. I'm guilty of this too. Everybody is. I think that my background in engineering and clinical trials and scientific data and some of those allow me to be more objective in the things that I say and be more balanced in the things that I say and understand when, there's a thing that comes out like from a vendor that says like if you say the word fuck in your, calls that you're 68% more likely to close deals, and it's clear that that is correlation, not causation, that when you have a better relationship with someone, you're more likely to feel comfortable cursing, which is an indicator that they're more likely to close a deal. So it's definitely a correlation, not causation. If you just show up on calls and start dropping F-bombs, you're not closing any more deals. And so I think that some of my background allows me to look at data and have a more objective view than other people would just purely based on my experience. I'm absolutely, like, every person has subconscious bias, whether it's for data or other reasons.
It's hard. I think it's hard to walk into something and look at it without an opinion. Now, scientifically, walking into something means we need to walk into it. It's hard for revenue people who tend to be more passionate. They walk in, there's so many people out there, and this is the next question, who are...
Actually, I want to drop something in here. It's interesting. It's interesting to think whether there's as much opinion when it comes to a company's P&L. The P&L is standardized, objective. If two people looked at it, they would probably come to the same general conclusions of what's going on in the business, but even then could have different interpretations or opinions of what it actually means. When you think about other types of business processes that tend to be more objective, the thing that I think about is like, why can't that happen in revenue? Why is it so much different when you look at your Salesforce data combined with like your intent data and your marketing automation and your million other tools compared to your P&L? And how do we close that gap as executives and professionals where we're able to look at our revenue data across the executive team in a shared view, common shared view, that allows us all to come to draw similar conclusions based on the data that we look at? And that's simply not happening in B2B companies today. Every single department, every single sub-function, all is looking at different data, different metrics with different filters. And I think it leads to a lot of people having different stories about what's actually happening and what we should do next.
This is the problem, right? This is, you stated the problem as you see it, and now you've expanded into, I listened to you, so I know where this is going and I love it. So I want to describe it how I see it or how I hear about it from you. Revenue is not just a function of making money or pipeline. It is an overall function of a company maintaining healthy revenue, healthy balance sheets. Talk to me about that, because I know there's a big release coming from you guys. I feel like it's software, and I feel like it's going to guide people into that kind of single view dashboard and then drill down. Is that where you've arrived after the last 4 years of collecting data? And how did you get there if that's the case?
Yeah, we're coming up on a new announcement and evolution of how it works. And so that's forthcoming. But yeah, starting in 2020, I got hired by the first like legit CMO that hired me, Allison Monroe at Venna. And she saw something in my LinkedIn content and believed in me, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And her and I worked directly for almost a year, and the first thing that we did was start to analyze the revenue data, and something that I had some opinions on, I had some ideas on, but I had never done at a company of that size and scale, aside from the ones that I'd been a direct employee of, and they had actually way better data than I had ever seen before. So we worked through some processes and we identified some things, and we saw that, despite having 65,000 and all the executives at the company that was purchased by PE, all the executives changed. So like nobody at the company is like cares about what happened in the past. They're just trying to look at the data to get insights, and which is a great situation to be in because they're not tied to the past. And we looked at the data, and despite having 65,000 MQLs come in the previous year, that they only won like 140 deals, and the win rates were super low, and their ACVs on high enough to support that, and they're spending, as a relatively small company, spending $150,000 on digital advertising to make that happen.
Per month.
And per month, yeah. And with just like what I would consider like a pretty basic analysis of what's actually happening, and identify all the places where the budget's being wasted, identify the things that are actually working, proven buyer journeys where buyers pass through, move through, a sales process you can convert to revenue in a repeatable and consistent way with good sales velocity. Find what those are, then start to re-architect the entire sort of like, at that point it was demand. Now I think about it as go to market because we have SDRs and how we utilize sales and field and other things like that. And then see just like a massive impact in the business, see great scalability where we actually took the advertising down from 150K to 50K initially, got CAC back in line and then built it back up. And then over the next 2 years scaled from 50K on 2 channels to a 400K across 12 channels. And that was like that data analysis was the first ever revision of the stuff that I continue to work on now. And then the 2 or 3 years between that, we probably did at least 100 of those types of analyses, and we learned new things about the process, and we saw a bunch of different companies' data, some of the shittiest data and some of the most like robust and well done, well governed, and be able to identify processes where we can repeatably do this and get similar insights. And then starting in June of this year, we started to look at it in a little bit of a different view of how do we start to apply automation to this? How do we start to apply standardization? How are we able to, no matter like if the company, what baseline stuff does the company need in terms of their data, and then how are we able to architect it and look at it in different views to be able to get to the end result and insights that we want and need? How are we able to then aggregate that data and look at patterns that we see over hundreds of companies? Or how are we able to use that to create benchmarks so that when we say, hey, company B, like you're really underperforming in this area, and then we can say, here's how 100 other companies perform, and here's their metric, and here's yours, to give them a clear sense of objective view of their relative performance. And I think that B2B companies need that right now. I think it's so much internal analytics from people, whether there's certain people at like the manager director level that are biased to show that their things are working the best, and I get it. But even at the RevOps level and having like a strategic view, I think that the processes that we've gone through over the past 4 years to analyze so many companies is just irreplicatable from an internal function. And so I think we have a lot to offer in terms of how we do it. We've been doing them manually for 4 years. It's semi-automated right now. We've gone from it taking 6 weeks to it taking 3 weeks. And I expect by the end of the year that it will be almost simultaneous.
It's
almost
big.
Instantaneous, yeah.
That's why mindset's got to be so big for you right now. 2 questions out. Well, 1 question. I can hear the medical and pharmaceutical device background when you speak about things, which I can really appreciate, right? Proving out theories. This goes back to a long time ago when people argued about like psychology and, Carl Jung and different people who were right and wrong. And there was never been a universal truth on anything. And I'm glad for that. But as you view this new era of revenue, when do you view that an early stage company should bring in RevOps and being very generic here, right? So is it services? Is it SaaS? Let's call it early stage SaaS or services company. You can fill in the blanks. Let's say they just crossed 500K and they're looking to hire that next sales team. Where would you recommend and why?
I think this is totally dependent on the skills of the people in the company. So it's tough for me to say, but you can kind of look at it in 2 ways that actually, I would say like when you have 6 reps, like somewhere around that range is where you should, and you're going to have to lean on your VP of sales or a rep that had done it before, or someone in marketing that kind of understands Salesforce for a little while. It's just hard. It's hard to like at 500K ARR, it's hard to carry a $150,000 RevOps person when you're doing 500K a year. It's like 20-30% of your revenue spent on a non-revenue producing and non-customer producing function. It's an operation. It drives efficiency. It's operationally smart, but you don't get the benefits of that operational efficiency until you reach some level of scale. So I think, I would say 6 reps is a good like sort of barometer to think about, somewhere in that range.
Where does a company bring in internal versus external? Because right now, if I look around, and let's just use my own company as an example. So we're on a 7th month. We just crossed $80,000 in revenue. We just crossed profitability, and we're targeting to exit the year at 58%, marching towards 1.3. And kind of this pause to go, what's next? I now shift my focus to, is our growth better served internally, or do we now need to outsource it to, let's say, a Refine Labs? And I'm not kissing your ass. I would hire you because I think you're the best. But give me some advice. Am I best to look for that internal, for that next, call it stage of demand, replacing just lead gen, or am I better suited to look for that internally or externally? Just give me your opinion on that.
I've talked with CMOs about this a lot in one-on-one conversations. A late stage CMO or like a mature company sort of looks at combining internal and external talent as a method of risk mitigation, in addition to the external firm injecting new ideas into their team and challenging their team. So whether that's having your SDR team and having a pod that's outsourced so that that pod is kind of pushing it, trying new things, bringing that back into you, you can kind of compare the performance. I think that for 1,000-person company, I think that would be pretty smart. I think the same thing could go for, advertising or thought leadership or even like experiential and physical events. I think there's some, at a late stage, I see it for that reason. When you look at like early stage, like a company like yours or a Series A company that just raised 5 million and has, just two sales reps just getting out of founder sales, haven't really done anything in marketing. I think that there is a lot of value in having the resources be outsourced at the beginning as a method of proving that the strategy works. If you believe as an executive that a company that's done it with 150 companies already is more likely to be successful than hiring one person off the street and hoping that they can do it, which is typically at that stage a manager level employee. I mean, you're sort of betting like 6 months to a year, a level of investment, the compounding growth of your company, all in the talent of this one person, and it usually doesn't work out. And so sort of reversing back and thinking, how do I use an external SDR firm or an external firm like Refine Labs or even like some cheapo LinkedIn ads agency to prove out your LinkedIn strategy or anything like that as a way to say, I'm going to use this firm. If it doesn't work, I can come to a confident conclusion that LinkedIn doesn't work. So I'm not going to hire somebody to do LinkedIn that I pay $8,000 a month and I'm going to have to fire after 8 months. So I look at it more as like a lower risk proof of concept and a much higher probability of success. And then if you start seeing that work, then start to blend internal resources with those external resources. I do see companies actively today and in the future moving much more to a hybrid talent model. There are like executives in two camps of like, we don't outsource anything, like fuck agencies, forget that consultant, like my team and my people, like that's what we do. And then there are people that are like, we're going to have we spend $1 million a month on paid media. We're always going to use a paid media agency, or we're always going to have a 5-person SDR pod that's pushing the limits. And those two sort of like polar opposite views, I think, will come more into a normalization where both groups see that there's a middle ground that's probably the ideal.
It's really fun to ask these. I have 2 more questions for you, Chris, today. I think this is a big thing, so I want everybody to listen up. If you're planning in revenue, this is going to be important. Budget planning cycles, some are complete, some are in it. There's a lot of flux. What is the single most important piece of advice that you would give anybody as they walk into their budgeting season?
So every company is going to look at their historical data and you try to use the historical data as an input to what are we going to do in the future. Typically, the issue in this type of planning for companies is that they segment by vertical or geography or segment, but don't take into account the full buyer journey. So most companies, when they do this type of planning, will look at stage 1 opportunity forward, and then it's a little marketing pet project to try and figure out other things, but they're not really looking at it holistically. And the key insight that, we have figured out over time is that all of the things that happen before the person talks to your sales team have a dramatic impact on the success inside of the sales process. And that level of data and that granularity of looking at it typically doesn't find its way into the planning as I've seen it today. And yeah, like your enterprise opportunities win at 6% and your mid-market opportunities win at 22%. That's great. But even inside of those little segments, the enterprise opportunity that fills out your demo request is going to close at a much higher rate than the one that you cold called that had never heard of you before. And so being able to apply to be able to break down your revenue data in a more granular view and then use that data to then be inputs of here's the historical performance, here's what we can expect for next year, and then start to apply other assumptions, efficiency improvements, insights from customers, which I'm going to get to in a second. And so companies typically, like if it's connecting marketing and sales data in a granular way to then help you look at historical data and then plan for the future, I think is one key element. There's a huge other element that I think is entirely underutilized and would be incredibly impactful for companies. of having a stream of customer insights that you're collecting from your customers, which become a core input to your next year's strategy, and understand where they get information, how much they trust, how they want to engage when they're ready to buy, what steps they want to be able to do on their own, who are the key people that their podcasts or shows or things like that they listen to get information, and understand all of that, which then allows you to make some confident decisions. Like if you're 97% of your customers say they want to know the price before they talk to your sales team, you have hopefully have a much better, for the past 6 years, you've been avoiding putting pricing on your website. Now you have this data. Maybe this is the year when 97% of your customers tell you that you actually put it on your website. And being able to use that input along with historical data of here's how we did before, here's what our customers are saying, here's what we think we need to change based on that, which then sort of propels both financial and data plan, as well as more of an overall, hey, here's how we're going to allocate budget, here's how we're going to change how we operate to accommodate how our customers want to buy, etc. So I think those two key inputs then propel you to the future. And it's something that we're working on a lot from an automation standpoint, to be able to go back and look at historical performance and then be able to then, with our level of granularity, be able to project at a much greater way the future outputs or, next year's plan or how they should be tracking for the quarter. I acknowledge that it's something that a company like Clary, or there's probably other ones out there that do this, but they start at stage one opportunity and they look forward. And like I mentioned at the beginning, everything that happens before it becomes an opportunity, and all that data and insight and how you look at that data and insight will then give you a much higher accuracy prediction for the future.
Wow, super informed question. This one, to me, I don't think I've heard you answer this next question, but this is the most interesting question to me into what my company does, which is content creation to drive revenue, and much more of a demand gen framework than lead gen. Funny, because I built a lead gen company. That company didn't work out. This company's very profitable. My life is much better. I think you were onto something. So I'll leave. This question, though, is about content, and we've got a lot of talking heads, right? Everybody's got the Zoom thing down. What we coined it as is 3D. Like, take this content from a two-dimensional platform of two people talking to each other into 3D, which could be, call it, this idea of creating a media channel, getting outside and doing content. Do you see that as the future, or call it the present and the future of content? And if it is, how do companies embrace that? Because that's not something that's easy for them to do and just turn on a Zoom account.
It's the past, it's the present, and it's the future. It's as simple as that. Like, for those that were paying attention, this has been a core successful strategy for companies since the mid 2010s, 2015, 2016, where you saw smart people transition from, okay, I'm going to write blogs and hope that people search for the blogs and find them. And I'm going to write commodity PDFs and put them on those blogs so that people find my blog and then download my PDF so I can email nurture them. And smart people started to move the pendulum to say, okay, instead I'm going to create video content, and then I'm going to be able to distribute that video content on my website, but also in all of these social networks. And so that was a process that I started to go through in 2015, 2016. I was using Facebook ads to boost a live in-person video podcast that I did with somebody, would take their perspective and put in front of our target customers on Facebook and Instagram ads with a lot of success. And so just to make the point, like, it's not just the present or the future, it was definitely the past as well. People have been able to leverage that to build, to accelerate growth in their business at a very significant ROI, while other people continue to do things that they had been doing since 2010. The true reason as to why it's successful is because the humans' method to consume content has evolved. And I don't believe that B2B companies, when are accurately assessing the way that their customers actually behave, they make a bunch of excuses. Oh, we sell to CISOs and they use ad blockers, so we'll just not run ads and instead we'll do content syndication or something like that. Or we sell to, neurologists. They're just in the ER or the OR all day and they're never on a mobile device and they never use social networks. And it's like, I know ER docs and I know neurologists and they're the craziest people I know, and they're posting everything on Instagram and they're riding motorcycles everywhere. It's like, you don't know your customer. You're making assumptions about your customer. And so the way that people fundamentally consume content has totally changed from, sitting at a, in-person conference listening to someone speak at an event, which people still do, but in 2012, that was one of the only ways to get good information. It's not anymore.
Yeah.
Reading gated PDFs when you boot up your desktop computer in the office in 2012 and you find a PDF and you consume it offline. And then when you need something, searching some blog in Google. The core difference now is that we can connect with all of our peers. I know all of the experts in the spaces. And if I'm into a new space, I can quickly, through using the internet, find who are all the experts in this space and what do they think and how are they producing information and how are they, influencing or impacting what my customers think. The way that people consume content has moved way more to natively inside of social networks. So I can remember back in the day on Twitter, like Twitter was basically write a blog and then post a link to the blog on Twitter and then hope that people click through. And over time, all the networks have deprioritized that because they make more ad revenue if you stay on the platform. It's not complicated. So they're deprioritizing, putting links and moving people off the platform to keep them on. So we are incentivized to create content that people consume inside of the social network without leaving, which is very foreign to B2B companies because they're used to having a click and a landing page view and a form fill to say whether their content was good or not. Instead of now, what we look at is, are these people sharing my content? I had a comment this morning, CMO commented on my post, this is so impactful, I share all of your stuff with my team. That's a way better data point about content than somebody clicked on our link to our case study. And so there's just a general shift that needs to happen in terms of how the level of understanding, true understanding that you have for your customer overall, that you're able to observe what they actually do and then be able to use those insights to basically like shape your strategy. So like the only reason that I ended up where I am today is all I did was watch what people were doing and listen to what they were saying and do what they were saying and doing. People sometimes reflect on what I'm doing as innovative, and really it's just what I talked about in planning. All I do is look at large scale historical data and performance, and I listen to what people and customers are saying, and I pair those two things together, and I actually use the data to make decisions. Even sometimes where people think it's unpopular or controversial, I don't see them as unpopular or controversial because the data to me feels very obvious that this is the things that we should be doing today.
Yeah. It inspired me to do this with our company. And so this to me is, for anybody listening, a Chris Walker inspired thought. We had a customer who was in a revenue pickle. We came in, they wanted to prove outbound. We said it won't work. We had great subject lines, great domain warming, great response rate. Everybody said no. Payroll company in Tennessee kind of took an ass whipping in COVID. And it's a payroll company in Tennessee. Like, what are you going to do? And we did a lookalike into their audience and said, hey, you guys do really good with restaurants. New to me. And by the way, they didn't have a lot of spend for any ad money. So we found out over 2 or 3 months that we got to get on a plane and go to Tennessee and hit the streets with cameras. And so we spent Thursday and Friday of last week literally just going on our own accord to 20 restaurants, eating the food, getting it all over ourselves, having the best fucking time of our life. And we got 128 pieces of content. And now we're building the landing page to say we are a payroll company for restaurants. We understand restaurants. And we were talking to owners of 5-star restaurants, eating the best desserts. And I sat there, I had to kind of pinch myself because I used to lead revenue teams, sales teams, right? But we weren't doing this. And I think the effect that that can have on this business is going to be profound. So even in that way of thinking, Chris, thank you for always challenging me and others to think differently about it. And it didn't cost a lot of money. It was $3,800 to charge the customer on cost, plus, we're services to do that. And I think the revenue could be significant from that. So thank you for inspiring me to think differently too all the time.
It's 100% easier to spend $100,000 on ads than do what you did. And that's what a lot of companies do. The cost when you are producing content is time. That's the cost. And talent and effort. The exact same constraints exist when you're running paid advertising, to be 100% honest. I do believe we'll continue to see a movement here, but at the same time, I like to balance it with realism. And so I think innovator, it's going to be great for your business, right? But when you look at broad, large scale movement of, the Cloud 100 or all Series B startups, I think it's going to continue to be a very slow adoption curve until people feel immense pain, which could be looming. But yeah, I think we'll see a correction at some point, but I think it continues to be slower than I would expect in terms of adoption.
Agreed.
Yeah.
This is fun, man. Thank you so much.
For having me. A lot of cool topics. Appreciate the questions and your preparedness, and also awesome to see your success so far. It's interesting also as you reflect back on your journey. It's easy to say like I started a lead gen company and that didn't work, and like lead gen must have sucked. But as I reflect on a lot of the things that I've done, like you could look at Refund Labs as my third company. The first two didn't have employees, but they did hundreds of thousands in revenue. And you just learn as a professional, and oftentimes the only way to truly learn is to get punched in the fucking face. A lot of people can, give you advice and things like that, but it's truly hard to feel the lesson until you really feel it as an entrepreneur. And it's a feeling and a learning and a lesson that 99% of people never even get exposed to. It's part of us sort of playing the game. So the way that I look at it is you did that, you learned a bunch of shit, now you're on your next one, and your next one's going to be even more successful because of all the stuff that you learned. And I look at that from my own perspective too. If I started another company tomorrow, everything that I've had with me in my past career then increases the probability and likelihood for the next thing, for me to make better decisions, for me to avoid mistakes, for me to do a lot of those things. So I sort of look at it the same way of where you are right now.
Yeah. Thanks, brother. It's not easy. It is entirely fucking worth it, because that tunnel going through it feels tight. But if you just keep, and that's why I said, like, you people like you kept me going. And when I say mindset, it's like, well, I had two choices. I could curl up and die. And that didn't seem like a very good choice. It didn't mean I wasn't sad. It didn't mean I didn't have regrets. It didn't mean I didn't have amends to make, but I just kept listening to positive people and plugging the holes where I was negative. It was financial acumen. Whoops, fuck. I didn't really know how to balance a P&L. I knew how to be a P&L watcher, but I really didn't understand the sensitivity around that. So round two, yeah, I do, but there's other blind spots I don't know about. And
always are.
Yeah. So thanks, brother. I'm going to keep on keeping on. So appreciate your time today. And it's fun to watch you guys keep growing, and your growth as well, Chris, as a person.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right, brother. Appreciate you too. That was fun.
Yeah, dude. Thank you. That was fun. Good one.
Yeah, I needed that today more than you knew. So thank you.
Happy to help. Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah, brother. I'm going to come see you soon.
Would love it. Yeah. Let's do one in person. I'm going to hold you to it.
I'm going to hold myself to it. All right, all right, brother. Be good.
Yeah. Great to hear about your success, man. Keep it going. All right.
Thank you, man.
Soon.
Thanks, everybody. Peace. Bye.